So, guys, we are so invested in the market of spreading the news that at this point we are kind of competing with ourselves. Probably our beautiful listeners can see by the title of today's episode that it is another episode of the most original show in the world, where we literally read out news and then comment on them, called Send News. But the only genuine competition out there to this style of news making, and it's not CNN, it's not The Guardian, it's not the Wall Street Journal, even though Jeff Bezos did try to buy us in 4 or 5 instances, but we rejected because obviously we make so much more money on Patreon that we decided that it would be a relatively decent idea to expand our quote-unquote expertise and our incredible bias towards current, past, and future events, that we ended up sitting together and creating another show called First Thought. So no, it's not only the deprogram, it's not only our individual YouTube channels, it's not our side projects that we also do, side projects like what Hakeem calls being a doctor or whatever the fuck, it's kind of a side project that shit is. But
I wasn't expecting that.
And then me and JT with our true legit shit as compared to fucking touching people's balls, like what the fuck. But no, jokes aside, we developed a 3 times a week news show. Usually the length goes between 4 minutes and 6 minutes, where 3 times a week you can get there, watch it, and hopefully be informed on all of the biggest events in the world that are transpiring at that moment. We are extremely biased from when it comes to our perspective, and we are trying to push them out as regularly as possible, and for now we haven't missed a single one. So if you're looking for a news source which is extremely concise, which can give you everything that you need, and that comes from a place that is objective from your point of view, then I think it would be a pretty smart thing to do to check out the links below. The show is called First Thought. You guys' opinions on how we're doing so far?
I think we're doing great. I'm suffering a little bit. This morning I got up at 6:45, still dark outside, so I could get the edit done before we recorded this episode, and it is now live. So we did it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Do you know, my favorite part about this is JT probably started this entire online YouTube career to escape the grueling 6 a.m. mornings at Best Buy.
Honestly.
now he has to get up and
drag me back.
Man, it's stopping me from being a complete degenerate the way I want to be all the time, because now our viewers will be proud of us, our listeners will be proud of us. We actually have a very strict schedule every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so that we can deliver you the fastest, most on the spot hard-hitting news that we can. But now, jokes aside, and now I can't just randomly go out on a Sunday night or a Tuesday night or a Thursday night and get absolutely shit-faced till 6 a.m. Now I have to move it to a Wednesday night or a Friday night. Kidding. No, to the nights before the days when we actually have to do this. But no, I'm very proud of the boys because as much as this podcast sounds like we just like to fart shit and touch balls, there's some genuine organizational capabilities behind communists. One would be surprised. And now not only do we run one project, but 2 and hopefully many more in the future with your lovely support, while quite literally running a 100% socialist enterprise where we split the labor amongst ourselves, we split the fruits of that labor amongst ourselves, and there's no sort of hierarchy where nobody's on top of someone else. And yet, look, if somehow it fucking works.
Aside from you Gopnik's whips when we don't get shit done on time, that's the only hierarchy that matters.
Yeah.
To get us to actually do everything on fucking time.
That is what was the term? Non-hierarchical management. It's management as labor, not as being in a higher position in the hierarchy, and then using that to manage.
I'm just busting your balls because
No, for the theory nerds in the background.
For the non-theory nerds in the background, the image that I want you to imagine is basically, you know, the cattle prods with the electrical ones. that's basically what you got the shelves into our backs.
But they're painted red and there's hammers and sickles on it, so it's
Exactly.
it's the people's rod. You know, it's fine.
If JT keeps coming on his videos with that beautiful curly hair, then I'm gonna be giving him my people's rod. God damn it.
I must have missed the video. He's coming on the videos?
Yeah. No, like he keeps showing up.
Okay.
Fuck me, English isn't my fucking please. Okay, aside from this absolute degeneracy, I have something else to share with you guys. So I got to play Good Little Housewife today.
Nice.
After I almost killed my colleagues at work. No. So let me tell you what happened. So there's what's it called? We have. I'm not going to go into the medical theory of it. Sometimes some people's hearts beat in a fucky way. You need to shock them a little bit. Yeah, it's a form of arrhythmia, atrial fibrillation, specifically the type. And we do something called electrocardioversion, which is basically a small shock that you put electrodes on, like, you know, these plaster things, electrodes onto the person, and then you shock them, and then it resets their heart rhythm. I mentioned it before, I think, in one of these talks. We do it very frequently.
Cool. Can I buy that for like home and like fuck with myself like that? It sounds like
you'll die, but yeah, sure. I mean, you can get a private defibrillator if you want to.
Sick.
That's not the exact same mechanism, but anyways, what happened recently is they got new machines. They've been so happy about these new machines. The old machines basically are ones where you push down the button when you're ready to shock somebody, and then when you lift off from the button, the shock is delivered. The new ones, and nobody fucking told me.
Oh no.
The new ones are you just press the button and it shocks immediately. You don't have to, like, you know, hold it and then pull back. And normally what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to look out, you know, and tell everybody, like, you know, clear from the fucking table.
Yeah, don't you do that whole fancy, like, clear, and then you look left and right. It's like
it's not that dramatic, but kinda, yeah. You're just like, everybody get the fuck out of the way. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna go press the button, and the shock and terror in these people's voices, because nobody had told me that I need to fucking that it's a new machine. So I press the button, I hear the shock immediately. I'm like, holy fuck. And the half a second of me turning around from the machine to look at, you know, the patient and the staff around, I was like, God, please let it not be that way. I just dropped three fucking people. And I look around and alhamdulillah, everybody was.
But that would have been such
away.
an even better story for the podcast, though. Like, did at least one die? Like, at least one?
Yeah, no. Alhamdulillah, the old lady was fine. I work with professionals, so everybody knew to keep clear of it automatically. But
nice.
Oh Lord! And then I came home and I became a good little housewife and I made creme caramel. So
to forget that you almost incinerated your coworkers.
Oh my God! Oh fuck!
So, quick question: is an electrical shock the only way to reset someone? What if you like spooked them?
No, that won't work. But you do have something called pharmacological cardioversion, so you can give them certain meds that will do the same thing roughly. But depends, like, in different factors will result in you having to use electrical or pharmacological. But no, giving them a good old spook or, like, I don't know, like a prostate massage or something, that doesn't work.
But does it work like the spook
Fuck
thing?
Me, I can't
the
speak.
Spook thing when
Sorry.
And I'm the guy who smokes. Jesus Christ. What was the? Does it actually work when somebody has the hiccups and you like scare the shit out of them, or is that like a folk
No,
tale?
it doesn't.
Oh fuck!
I've
scared the shit out of so many people with that being the excuse.
I will always repeat this. It's my favorite medical fact. The only thing that's been clinically proven to get rid of hiccups is rectal stimulation.
I knew it.
Line up, boys.
That was my second favorite thing to randomly do to people when I see them hiccup. I would scare them.
Right.
It doesn't work. Then I would rectally stimulate them. It was weird one time when my dad was hiccuping, but you know, you gotta do what you gotta do. So, So, as we previously said, welcome yet again to the most original show in the world, yet another installment of Send News, where we will be reading out certain articles and certain news segments from all around the world, and then very specifically commenting on them. We are probably more professional at this now, because again, we are doing this as true real journalists in a very serious fashion over at First Thought.
Yes.
So, for the last month, we basically combed the entire interwebs for the most interesting stories.
What is this accent?
Out of which
He's a newscaster, can't you tell?
Suck my
I
fucking.
see. Oh, okay. Sorry, go on.
Yes.
Go ahead.
The new segments that these two lovely assholes, together with myself, have picked out for you this from the past week or two should be pretty interesting. With that being said, I give the floor to our favorite Yank to start with the first story of the day.
Oh, I'm your favorite. Oh, okay.
It's like, wait, is there? Can there be like a favorite if you like dislike all the rest? You know,
the least unfavorite.
the least unfavorite.
Least
Okay,
disliked.
there we go. I love
Great,
how
thanks.
it's absolutely acceptable to be racist to like Caucasian Americans and Brits. Like it's like 100% okay.
Angles out.
Oh yeah. You call me a cracker anytime, boys.
I'm glad you didn't include French people in that categorization, because French people aren't people.
Yeah, French quote people, huh? All right.
Contrary to popular opinion, I actually like white people, like, white pride. And okay.
Oh my God.
I can say this is a non-kinda like no Slavs are like white and not we're
You're
like
not
what white adjacent. What was that fucking
Yeah.
thing? Like Latin X, we're Slav X. No, we're white X. Oh, God,
May I begin
sorry,
the first
please.
story of the day?
I allow it.
Yes.
I allow
Yes,
it. Go.
Go ahead.
All right. Fox News settles lawsuit over election lies. So Fox has they just settled the at the 11th hour. Like they had already picked the jury and stuff, and then Fox finally caved and like, all right, fine, we'll pay $787.5 million to Dominion, which is a voting machine company. You know, the things that you go and you press the little tablet and it submits your vote. You know?
Pokemon Go to the polls.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's that thing. But this is the largest media libel settlement in history. It is 4 times larger than the previous record holder,
Wow.
which was a Disney lawsuit where I forget which company they were slandering by saying their meat was pink slime or something like that, which is probably accurate, honestly, knowing American food. But anyway, this comes after the claims of election rigging in the 2020 presidential election, where Fox News was blasting every day, 24 hours a day, that the election was rigged in favor of Joe Biden. Now, that's not to go down a rabbit hole saying that all U.S. elections are indeed rigged in one way or another, but it's not in this particular way that they were claiming. So this fine that they're paying, the $787.5 million, it's basically a slap on the wrist. I mean, it's a lot of money.
As always.
It's
But
historic,
it's a lot of money
but
still.
yeah, I mean, it's huge. But Fox spent $3 billion on stock buybacks on the first quarter of this year, and they've got $4 billion additional on hand. They are an incredibly wealthy company. So it's just a kind of a publicity thing. The CEO of Dominion gets a nice paycheck, but it's not gonna affect Fox in any way. But the Dominion
Read the quote.
Yeah, the quote. This is the best part. The Dominion CEO said, quote, "Truthful reporting in the media is essential to our democracy." Which is like, come on.
But isn't that the meme where they have like that compilation
It is.
of all of the
Yeah, exactly.
Very
Yeah,
dangerous
that's
to our
the-
democracy.
The sharing of biased and
False news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish things they simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
For those who are out of the loop, that was some person put together a compilation or like a mosaic of videos of Sinclair
of them.
Broadcasting. Yeah, it was a bunch of local stations that were all fed the same script. And so they all said, this is extremely dangerous to our democracy. And it's very dystopian to watch and listen to them all say it at the same time with the same intonation. But, that's the idea. It's like only Americans think American news is unbiased and, free from propaganda and stuff, which clearly not.
It's like,
we're very bad with media literacy here.
It's like one of the best things, arguably one of the small amount of things, but still very important positive aspects of living in still capitalism but in the developing world is that everybody locally knows that everything that comes out on the news is absolute fucking shit that's being spoon-fed to us by this side or that side that never at the end of the day has looks out for our interests. I'm talking about working class interests in any way. And it's like not even it's here, at least I can talk about the Balkans. You will sound like a conspiratorial nut if you actually propose the concept that like media can be unbiased. It is it's quite to the contrary. While in the US, even now, after a company has been sued and has paid out over $800 million, keep in mind they're paying out this sum, $800 million, in order for the court case not to continue. So, and these are people who can pay for literally the top dollar lawyers that exist out there. So they understand just how much more they can be potentially liable to losing. And imagine how much they could be possibly losing if they have signed the agreement where they are paying this particular insane fucking sum. And this thing happening is in no way, one would argue, like I will sell my right fucking arm if this happens, will in no way influence Fox's reputation.
Yeah.
When in its viewership demographic and so on, psychographic, blah blah blah, because at the end of the day, it's like. I don't want to use like stupid ass like Jacobin or fucking the Atlantic terms and shit like post-truth and so on. But it really is like nobody gives a fuck if something is true or not. They only give a fuck if somebody's regurgitating their previously established political and ideological opinions. And I might be taboo for saying what I'm about to say, but that's kind of how it like always was, just the pretense, the kind of curtain that we all agreed that we're gonna believe exists, called unbiased reporting, is at this point just not really accepted by anyone except some academics in universities and very weirdly people that actually work at these institutions. Like, probably if you talk to a motherfucker who works for CNN, BBC, The Guardian, oh God, the fucking Atlantic, Jesus Christ. Only true academic paper left out there, or AFP, Foreign Policy, or Politico. Oh my God, they made us read that so much back in uni. They will unabashedly believe that they are doing their absolute best to deliver news from an unbiased perspective. And a lot of those particular journalists might even do that, but might even attempt to do that because it's kind of impossible. But their boards on the top and their editorial boards as well on the middle are so filled by people with so many intrinsic interests that co-align with particular national interests, particular class interests, etc., that at one point becomes impossible. But sorry for the rant. It's just absolutely incredible that when one of the biggest news broadcasters on planet Earth, when it talked about one of the quote-unquote most important things for our democracy, the election, and they came out and they said okay, let's not go down a conspiratorial rabbit hole, like objective insane lies. And then they were not only proven, they admitted to having blatantly lied about the election, the number one big American thing. And they still get to, have public broadcasts. They still will have hundreds of millions of people tuning in every week to listen to their opinions, etc., etc. When something like this happens and there's literally no consequence except, them giving, 5% of their actual fucking income, then shit is really fucking messed up.
regardless of how much they pay, regardless of how many things they're forced to say on air. Like they were required to make a disclaimer in one of their news broadcasts saying that, yes, we acknowledge that this court case happened and it was determined that some claims we made on this network were untrue, something like that. It's not going to affect public opinion at all. Like Yugopnik said, Fox News especially, you're going to have people saying, oh, this is just the deep state. They're trying to take down Fox News again. They're all in on it. The judges,
Exactly. And even worse, like people will say, look at this court case, and I would prove that they lied. Our democracy works. Yeah, like if they lie again, we're gonna catch them again. But no, they had to lie about the number one biggest fucking thing in like the American psyche, the richest country on planet Earth, and they had to lie about a multi-billion-dollar company that's involved in the most important American thing, elections. And then, after lawsuits upon lawsuits upon lawsuits, they ended up admitting that they were wrong. But they say, some lie about some school fucking shooting or whatever the fuck that causes some teenager to blow his fucking brains out of depression. You think that they'll ever be, accountable for that?
No.
Fuck no. And yet that same thing can be used as an argument that, it works because, look, they got sued and they lost.
Typical, the theater of trying to pretend that everything's above board. Oh, we have checks and balances. We're independent and all that nonsense. There's transparency, supposedly. But much more importantly, I was looking at the sum. I was like, $800 million being paid to, and I didn't read it right at first. I was like, Domino's? Wait, the pizza chain? I was like, what the fuck are they getting? Why is Fox News?
The enemy of my enemy, Domino's, is our comrade because they fight Pizza Hut, who single-handedly brought down the Soviet Union, so...
Oh my god, exactly right. Fuck. I guess moving on in further news, I don't know if people have seen the absolute meltdown on social media, so basically it doesn't exist in the real world. But recently Twitter had begun applying kind of like a more common policy of the state-affiliated media tag. So for example, NPR or what's it called, the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Service, or all these other ones. I don't know what the fuck the CBC stands for, actually. It's not service.
Company?
Fuck. Company. Corporation.
Yeah, one of those.
Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, excuse me. All of them basically have decided to resign off of Twitter. Ooh, we're stepping down from Twitter because our journalism is impartial and independent.
God.
To suggest otherwise is untrue. This is why we are pausing our activities on Twitter. NPR as well is like, we're stepping away from Twitter, and they include the various feeds that they take care of. And just looking at the nonsense. I don't know, okay. The meme is that, government funded versus public funded versus state affiliated, etc. These are three different categories. NPR at the beginning was listed as state funded, and they were like, oh no, we don't. The government doesn't influence our policy whatsoever. So then they're like, oh no, okay, then government funded, etc., etc. But still, the entirety of it is nonsense because their claim is we're sure, we get funding from the government. But we're completely 100% independent in our reporting. And if you believe that, then I have a bridge to sell you, because that's
just not an
nonsense.
American bridge because it'll collapse. So please don't buy this.
Yeah, exactly right. Like the absolute level of nonsense. In what's it called? There's a very, very good book by Parenti called Democracy for the Few. It's actually a textbook, so it's fairly dry in reading. But he has an entire segment on media manipulation. In the United States, and how extensive all these so-called independent news sources can be fucked with by the military, by the government, by individual politicians if they so decide. So for you to assume that, for example, there is, this fucking Avengers Marvel view of, the good guys are all independent even though they get money from the government, but RT is, no, they're completely controlled by the Russian government, despite the fact that RT claims the same exact thing, that they have complete independence in their reporting and whatnot. It's just very pathetic, it's very childish, and it just leads more into this weird Harry Potter view of the world where, the good guys, even if they do the same thing because they're good guys, quote unquote good guys, it makes them, By the way, these are the same people who are like, to stop Iran's bomb, we have to bomb Iran. Bomb Iraq now.
Conveniently lines up with all the State Department talking points, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. My favorite one, by the way, is Radio New Zealand, also throw a fuss. And I'm like, doesn't New Zealand
even
have
know
all
that
like 12
existed.
people? Yeah, first of all, who the fuck still listens to radio? Number one, but number two, New Zealand has all
Said
12
as he
people
was
living in it.
talking on a digital radio.
Yeah, I know, but like, let's not get lost in the nuance here. I'm just trying to meme on the fact that Radio New Zealand thought that they'd be like, you know what, I'll step up to the plate. Oh my god, just a little bit ridiculous.
Well, we can admit this is the rare Elon W. I would still like the man to eat a lethal dose of gravel, but I'll accept that this was funny.
It was.
If he worked 10 years in his own mines, in his family's own emerald mines, then maybe he could be
A productive member of society.
You know,
he could be absolved.
maybe Elon Engels twist moment, but nah. Don't count on it, children. Don't count on it.
Exactly.
But like, I love how this story played out in the most cliche way. I wouldn't have bet on it playing out this way, because they literally said, we're about to treat you the same way we treat government-funded media companies from the East. And then they literally just flipped the table, and they were like, no, fuck you, you can't co-identify me with the orcs.
Ideology.
And literally,
that's how deep the ideology is.
I'm sure you're both familiar with the old Cold War joke where it's the CIA agent and the KGB agent get together for a friendly drink in the bar, and the American's like, man, I gotta hand it to you guys. Like, we do good work, but the propaganda you guys put out is incredible. Everyone seems to believe it. And then the KGB agent's like, no, comrade, I can't. We do good work, but we can't stand up to what the CIA does. And the CIA guy gets pissed and he says, what are you talking about? There's no propaganda in the United States.
Yeah, exactly right. It's so tired, but it's so true. It's what can you do? You up, Nick. Take it away. Take it away with another a fantastic story on the recent U.S. leaks.
Okay, so my story I will cut up into a few segments so that we cover it throughout today's episode. But pretty much everyone at this point, hopefully, has heard about the massive U.S. Secret file data leaks. If you haven't, then check out First Thought, where you can get updated about things like this on the daily. We basically found out that an edgy gamer teenager who was employed by the United States, and oh my God, imagine how many death squad, as much as we hate them, extreme professional, still fucked up individuals, but extreme professional, mass world destroying dead CIA agents are flipping in their graves from understanding what type of people are now being employed by the U.S. military, especially to govern top state secrets, which at the end of the day was literally this guy's job. He was basically supposed to move things from A to B without those things being discovered. And this guy
posting them on Discord.
Yeah, and this
excuse me, Thug Shaker Central.
Exactly.
And Minecraft Discord servers.
Basically, he got called a soy boy cuck. And in order to prove that he's not a soy boy cuck, he was like, look at the type of fucking info I got, you soy boy cucks. And then that spread all over Discord and so on, which gives me kind of just from an ideological point of view, even partially anthropological, hope for the future generations, because nobody will give a fuck enough about their capitalist state or their corporate overlord, etc., to be ready to either keep their secrets or go to actual physical war for them. So but there might be, I don't know, in the future wars over who's a bigger soy cock or not on Discord, which would lead to physical conflicts. But somebody sharing the nuke codes, you see, I'll show you, Ivan, from Chelyabinsk. But jokes aside, so this stuff moved around the Discord servers and ended up being posted on actually a channel that I'm a relative fan of, even though I still can't really feel their exact political stance, called Wow Mao. I think they're Filipino or something. pretty edgy shit, pretty funny shit. Kind of basically invented created, popularized the clip. I am Greek god. I have golden sperm. But what about Hagia Sophia? Ancient battle between great Turkish male and great Greek male. Greek god sperm. But and it ended up in their hands, and then afterwards, not afterwards, but in parallel, spread throughout the world. So the first relatively interesting story that we got out of the leaks, because a lot of people have probably seen a lot of individual news articles about specific things that were leaked from the file, and I made a little list of the most interesting ones. So after hopefully we go through it, you will not really have to go anywhere else except for First Thought, obviously, to get more informed on these particular leaks. So when it comes when it comes to Russia, Ukraine, the papers comprise details about the course of the war in eastern Ukraine that are particularly explosive. They include maps of Bakhmut and Kharkiv regions, as well as delivery timetables for Western munitions to Ukraine. According to these documents, Ukraine's armed forces seem to be considerably weaker than has so far been claimed, and Washington appears to be worried that Ukraine would be unable to repel a renewed Russian offensive. There is talk of gaps in Ukrainian air defenses, and a shortage of ammunition is anticipated as early as May. However, the documents also claim that U.S. has infiltrated the Russian military and the paramilitary Wagner group at the highest levels in order to inform Kyiv as early as possible about any Russian plans of attack. The leaked papers also outline how far the war in Ukraine would have to escalate in order for China to be prepared to supply Moscow with weapons. That potential is being thought of, as we can see. Allegedly, it would do so, by it we mean China here, as soon as Ukraine carried out an attack on actual Russian soil, which is kind of strange because there has been plenty of attacks on Russian soil, but I guess here it is implied that actual troops are then officially from the Ukrainian side moving into Russian territory. Another document reports that Egyptian President Abdel supposedly held discussions with top-level military officials in February about supplying Russia with artillery shells and ammunition in strictest secrecy in order to, quote, avoid problems with the West. The Wagner group is also said to have asked sources in Turkey to supply weapons and equipment for its activities in Ukraine and Mali. As we know, Wagner and the Russian state are having a bit of a fallout from time to time. Wagner, as a private institution, might for that reason be looking for additional sources of weaponry, though it is unclear to what extent the Turkish government would have been aware of this. So when it basically TLDR, when it comes to the leaks and how they relate to the war in Ukraine, it's not anything too shocking. It's that not everything is as it seems from the American side. Probably if we had leaks from the Russian side, we would see that not everything is as it seems when it comes to how they're pitching the war to their local population. Don't get me even started on how the Ukrainians are pitching it to theirs. But what's more interesting is that, to me at least, it's not only being taken seriously, but probably a lot has been invested and a lot of analysis and research and counter-espionage has been done on the question of the big taboo whether China would participate in this conflict as a direct ally to an open ally to Russia, which leads to some potential future questions that will get answered at some other points. But yeah, the Americans are kind of doing due diligence, as from what I can see personally from these leaks, when it comes to that particular conflict zone. What do you guys think?
For the U.S., there's a level of of course, incompetence, blah, blah. Some people also said that, no, this is Russian misinformation, or not particularly Russian misinformation, but that it was the Russians that somehow got a hold of this very sensitive material and they released it. Not understanding that would basically waste months of very difficult intelligence work on the Russian side. Why would you tell your enemy that you have your your supposed enemy, quote unquote, you know what I mean? That you have their intelligence, like you've infiltrated this deeply. Why would you announce it? It's a stupid point, and I think we can disregard it. It seems that's like a tire trope at this point, that anything that happens in the U.S. because of the incompetence of Americans is immediately blamed on Russia as a boring scapegoat without evidence. It gets very tiring. That doesn't mean that Russia probably doesn't try stuff like this, but the point is a bit overstated, I would say. That's number one. But number two, the most interesting thing about this is the fact that the leaks showed how the war in Ukraine is going very badly for the Ukrainians. And it very clearly indicates that the US is like 100% in on this war, even to the detriment of Ukrainians. And also, by the way, without them directly contribute, like they're trying to strong arm all their supposed allies into sending weapons to Ukraine so that they don't have to do it themselves. And it's, I don't know, it's of course not a good look for the United States in front of their allies, but also, much more importantly, it kind of goes to show the thing that everybody said at the beginning, which is the U.S. really is an obstacle to any form of peace, no matter what form it may take place, some form of ceasefire, something in the region with this conflict. And of course, we know leading up to this conflict, the United States really stoked the fires of this and tried to get conflicts going between Russia and Ukraine. So yeah, that, and also, of course, the increasingly lost face in the international community by the U.S. I don't know, it's all like, what did Mao say? It's chaos under heaven, all is right with the world. I don't fucking remember. I'm paraphrasing horribly, but yes. The long decline of the American empire is a beautiful thing to see.
Moving on to a related one here, Brazilian President Lula is on the U.S.'s shit list for the crime of telling the truth and saying that the U.S. is encouraging the war in Ukraine. This criticism comes as Brazil and many other countries are attempting to extricate themselves from under the U.S.'s boot in favor of better relations with China, a country that's actually intent on solving the Ukraine conflict through diplomacy. Wouldn't that be nice? The U.S.
Didn't you see the foreign policy article, which was like, "Oh, China makes peace with bare teeth"?
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you talking about?
Fuck up. Peace, but at what cost? Like, the cost is peace. The cost is not killing. Oh my God. Anyway. The U.S. National Security Council spokesman has labeled the decision to call for peace, quote, parroting Chinese and Russian propaganda. It's just like with the leaks and with this stuff and with all these other countries moving away from the U.S., it's very, very clear what's going on here. Like, you have the belligerents, you have the ones, like the U.S. is clearly trying to instigate here to their own benefit and to the detriment of all the combatants involved and all of the innocent people getting embroiled in this conflict. And they're doing everything they can to slander people who actually want to resolve this issue peacefully. And it's really disgusting to watch. But yeah, Lula is the most recent one, and he's been doing some pretty good stuff. I mean, people were skeptical about him as like not being as based as required, but I think he's doing a fairly good job.
He's doing all right given his circumstances,
yes.
Of course. I think it goes without saying that all of us would nationalize everything and fucking abolish private property. Yeah. Yes. All of us would want these things, but that you gotta remember that Brazil has a incredibly reactionary and very large military with many different factions in it. So if he steps the wrong way, then this guy will end up dead. And whatever political support he has as well.
Yeah, honestly, my money is on that. Once the U.S. gets significantly pissed off, they need to try to reestablish a hold on south of the border. They're gonna give that a try.
Look, I hope that they try. I hope they try the same thing that they tried with Maduro in Venezuela, where they badly flew like a half-broken fucking drone. With a grenade attached to it that didn't even go off or something.
Shit, yeah.
Yeah, I swear, it's so stupid. Oh my God. It reminds me of all the great ways that the CIA tried to assassinate Fidel Castro, which, by the way, is one of our bonus episodes. So become a patron and take a look.
Unlock this and many more episodes on Patreon.
There we go. Yes, he even gets the voice in. I love it. Unironically, very good episode, though. Do check it out.
It was fun.
Moving on, though. Our next story is... One that's very sad, actually, because it's a part of the world that we don't really hear about, and you normally associate with like just bliss in the clean and pale sands and perfect water. If you don't know about the island of Vanuatu, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. It's basically off the east coast of Australia. It's in the Pacific. It's one of those like dreamy islands, right? Tropical, beautiful location, beautiful people, beautiful weather. It's a small island, and vast majority of their income and economy is in tourism. And what happened, as you're aware, with COVID, there's all these lockdowns, so the island lost a lot of basically their only source of income. They lost a huge share of it, so they were hit very hard. And the beginning of the previous month, they were hit by 2 cyclones back to back, which destroyed basically a ridiculous amount of key infrastructure. Roads, ports, the airport that they have was destroyed by the cyclone. 80% of the population, around 250,000 people, were without power or food. Many of them had their homes destroyed. Water supplies were patchy in a lot of places over the island. The worst part about this is the people on the island basically have been trying to get more and more tourism to start up again, so that they can start earning something, so they can rebuild their lives. But this is something that only gets worse and worse as climate change progresses, even down to the line of basically the entire island being underwater down the line. And the worst part of all of this is that under capitalism, there is no structured way of dealing with these many islands across the world that will be facing this exact situation, or are already facing this exact situation. Under socialism, if you had like a proper, this is going to be very dreamy, so do take it with a grain of salt, but if there was like a socialist UN of sorts, then you would have the ability to divert funds specifically to either, number one, figure out some way to protect coastlines of these small areas, or number two, to have these massive relocation projects, so these people can move to somewhere that would still be able to be protected, and that they can continue their traditional ways of life if possible. But as it currently stands, basically the only thing these people have at their disposal is IMF, to call it help would be to be very nice, as well as essentially their own bootstraps. In the real sense of the word, I mean, like the original sense of the word, is it's an impossibility. They can't basically tourism their way out of this crisis. And it's just very sad. And this is just one example across many island nations. The Maldives is another big example. Not to be a downer, but to remind you why we fight for socialism. Yeah. Anyways.
Well, it's a very common and sad story, unfortunately, and it's one that I've seen firsthand. I've mentioned this before, but I shot a documentary in the Marshall Islands, and they are facing the same thing, where their coastline is eroding very rapidly. Like, I was there during the king tide, which is the highest tide of the year, and there were waves not in people's backyards, but they had gone all the way past the house, through their front yards, into the road. So it looked like houses just sitting in the ocean. And it's shocking and terrible, and the only course of action these people have, they want to stay, but they can't. Within 50 years, they're going to have to go. And so the only course of action they've been able to take is to move to the United States. 90% of people from the Marshall Islands move to this little town in, I believe, Arkansas, and they work at the same Tyson chicken manufacturing plant.
Turning this huge catastrophe, both ecologically, socially, even economically, into some sort of profit opportunity. This is it's disgusting.
It really is, and it's also darkly funny that they're having to flee to the very country that irradiated some of their islands so severely that people have not been able to move back to them. This was, Bikini Atoll, the nuclear test back in the 50s. You had chunks of coral, massive multi-ton chunks of coral, launched into the air that landed on other islands. You had people had to evacuate their homes that they've lived on for generations. And we talked to one of the people there who remembered what it was like having to leave and dealing with the radiation sickness and stuff. It's horrific, and but that's just how it goes under capitalism.
That's America to me. Do you know that's mom and dad and apple pie, baseball games, and picnics in July,
nuking the Marshall Islands till they die.
I love it.
Oh, sick fuck. Well, the market trying to solve absolutely everything, including massive man-made natural disaster, is one out of, I don't know, countless errors in the system, which, to one extent or another, one could make an argument that, market competition, blah, 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 leads to this and that improvement and so on. But not to sound like a broken record here on the show, at one point, it quite literally, the efficiency, we're not even talking about any sort of liberal ethics here or some shit, just the efficiency of the market approach, defining anything that is susceptible to capital injection or not, ends up quite literally hurting both the local population and the local economy. And as the environmental disasters start piling up one on top of another, we will be seeing it not only hurt certain, let's say, parts of the world, but quite literally destroy them in its totality. So if you think you're safe in your little village or your little town or your little megalopolis over in, I don't know, central France or central China or central US, and you think, just because you're positioned in that particular part of the world as compared to the equator, this thing isn't going to come to you. Well, my friend, where do you think all these motherfucking people are going to go? There is no such thing as a particular massive, especially destructive event, happening in one part of the world and that not influencing the rest. Just like how Western Europe thought that, the Americans kind of got away with it, but how 3 decades of massive sanctions and massive conflict in Hakim's part of the world is in no way going to impact them. And then they're all of a sudden, why the fuck are there like 20 million people on the borders moving from that part of the world that is basically fucking burned down to ashes? Same thing, but to a much bigger extent, my beautiful, beautiful white people listening, is going to be happening once the people in the equator and wider can no longer sustain themselves in those parts of the world. And as fucked up as it sounds, then the developed whites of the West are probably gonna give AKs to my fucking people to shoot your fucking people so that they don't get over to their beautiful pristine homes. But everyone shall feel the consequences of this, not only the people of Vanuatu. But okay, not to get too depressing. Let's move into the Americans taking L's and a continuation of the leaks. So previously we talked more heavily about the Ukrainians and the Russians, but now we have the next point of what has come out. So a request from the U.S. apparently resulted in a major dispute in South Korea about supplying artillery munitions to Ukraine. Until now, Seoul has not provided Kyiv with military support. So this was nowhere in mainstream news, but apparently there has been diplomatic strife, let's call it that, between the Yanks and the South Koreans. Over in Iran, according to the leaked information, U.S. Secret Services are monitoring both the Iranian nuclear program and the Iranian security apparatus with information coming from very high-level sources. One document, for example, describes in detail the preparations made by senior leaders in Tehran for a visit by the Director General for International Atomic Energy, Rafael Grossi. This part of the news is is not exactly surprising, but one needs to the way it's impactful is that it does show us that no matter how like professional and closed up the top echelons of the security services of Iran are, certain leaks can always happen. But I guess this happens absolutely everywhere. And then we move to our favorite non-existing country of is not real. Leading Mossad representatives are said, and this is spicy, to have argued in February in favor of encouraging protests against the pending judicial reform and actively calling for condemnation of the new so-called far-right government in Jerusalem. So imagine like in Israel, something is like far-right, so already like like by existence a far-right entity, and then they have like far-right motherfuckers. That's just scary to me. I don't know. But the Israeli government has obviously denied this, pointing out that its intelligence service is traditionally politically neutral. Again, leading us to that previous conversation of what the fuck can be politically neutral, and like it's super cringe that you call like a media house politically neutral, but the additional levels of cringe of calling Mossad, fucking Mossad politically neutral. What's next? Fucking CIA is politically neutral. Ja, mein Führer, the SS is politically neutral. We do not sense like what?
Habibi, you forget that the CIA on their podcast specifically said, they're a politically neutral institution. Do you don't remember?
Oh my god. Wonder how they're doing.
We're gonna definitely do another episode of those.
We'll invite them on the show.
Politically neutral Mossad, guys. You heard it here first, man.
All right, then. Well, then leading very quickly from that into a adjacent source of news. I think I'll just bunch these two into one because they're very quick ones. Recently what's happened is, as you're aware, Europe has been made to basically carry the burden of supporting Ukraine through the war, and Poland has been one of the largest supporters currently. But what's happened is basically the amount of food imports, agriculture produce flowing from Ukraine into Poland is almost bankrupting the agricultural sector in Poland, and Polish farmers are they're not sitting very pretty. So the Polish government, in basically a crisis decision, decided to ban all agricultural imports from Ukraine until the end of June, which includes grain and honey and all this other kind of stuff, because sugar, eggs, meat, milk, fruits, vegetables, amongst a whole host of agricultural stuff. And this is kind of like catching wind in Romania and other countries in the EU and in Europe in general, because these countries, the governments that are being made to support Ukraine are already relatively poor, and their farmers aren't that wealthy either. And now all of a sudden their produce is being undercut by very cheap and usually like non-taxed, because they're kind of doing it as a favor to Ukraine, produce that's flowing into these countries. So this caused a miniature political crisis, and this is the thing that they're doing. And funnily enough, what the original plan was for Ukrainian grain to go to Europe, and then from Europe to go and continue to be exported into the North African and West Asian regions, to Africa, to Latin America, to other parts of the world, as was before the war. But what ended up happening is this very cheap grain, flowed into Poland, and the Polish companies were like, you know what? This is very cheap. We can use this for our own purposes for very high profit margins. So that's basically what the market found a solution, which was don't export this grain that was destined for Africa to Africa. Instead, we should keep it as a very cheap raw material input for our bottom line. Very, very disgusting behavior.
I love how the biggest argument was, this war is going to cause mass starvation in other parts of the world, because obviously
I heard that wrong.
Both Russia and Ukraine supply.
I heard this war is going to cause masturbation.
Masturbation. Well, it probably does.
The defense contractors, the defense
I was
contractors
very confused.
For sure.
Haven't you seen those pictures from February and March last year of Las Vegas strip clubs riding Ukrainian and female refugees welcome and shit.
Jesus, yeah.
Very messed up behavior. But so two things. It's lovely how the market doesn't have patriotism, and it was like fuck Polish grains, fuck, and obviously the guys that were supposed to receive the grain by contract probably like had to cut their contract over in Central Africa and shit. Then it ended up being only used to make extra money for the local businessmen. Number one, and number two, again, what was starting to say previously, how like it writes itself. It's absolutely incredible. So no matter what you think about the as they call them, the ukrops or the orcs, the amount of damage that just the market by itself is doing to developing parts of the world not getting enough food is nowhere even near to this like all out open fucking full frontal war between these two countries. Like even during this entire conflict, oil still flows and food still flows, but then it gets in the hand of the market. It's like, man, we got some fucking war grain up in this bitch that's like not taxed because of because of the war, and then they find a way to make some extra money off of it. It's that's why it's so difficult to now I'm philosophizing or whatever the fuck, but so difficult to quantify the damage that capitalism does versus some guys with AKs shooting at each other, right? Because that's very direct. You see blood, you see guts, you see legs flying all over the place, etc., and then you play the usual, A is bad because B is good, or B is bad because A is good. But when the market is literally slowly starving out entire sections of the global population, it's more difficult to properly present, and more difficult for white suburban moms to be pissed off about.
Moving on for a very, very beautiful point that Yopnik made, though. I want to connect this.
Okay, I'm not gonna do the deep throat of the microphone. It's not clean.
We can save that for after the recording. That being said, though, a semi-related story. Of course, the market finds a way. The IMF has handed down a restructuring package for Egypt, essentially demanded by the IMF because Egypt is heavily indebted, and what they're calling for is, number one, privatization of state assets, a whole host of state assets. Number two, deregulating markets, and number three, looser control over the currency, so that inflation can continuously fucking go skyrocket beyond belief, as it already has, because food and the prices of food are so insane in Egypt right now compared to real wages of people, and they want to make the situation even worse. But this is not the real point that I want to highlight. This happens basically for every country around the world, outside the imperial core.
But the IMF is apolitical, just like Mossad, though.
No. Exactly, yeah. The IMF is apolitical, but do you want to know how apolitical the IMF is? The current the head economist, who is the managing director of the IMF, is number one. She's Balkan.
Oh, I know.
Number two,
don't embarrass me like this. The Bulgarian lady. Oh, fuck me. Yeah, please go on.
Yeah, she was born into a family of bureaucrats, civil engineers, and shit like that. And her grandfather was a Bulgarian leftist revolutionary. She got her PhD in economics in the Karl Marx Higher Institute of Economics in Sofia. But she did her postgraduate in London, and then she went to MIT, I think.
Wow. And now she's the grand dragon of the IMF.
Exactly right. Major cringe. I think.
I used to repeat this all the time, and I will literally tattoo this on my fucking arm because I think I invented it. The worst possible capitalist is an ex-communist. They're just
exactly right.
fucking raw dogging the world, man. Like ethics, like anything, out of the fucking room.
Yeah, no, that's it. This lady oversaw 60% of lending operations of the World Bank. Jeez. Basically, from the 90s until now, this woman has been, like you said, a grand dragon of all this, and it's just the way life makes it the way life finds a way to make all this shit funny is just always intriguing. By the way, I misspoke. By the way, her grandfather was a nationalist revolutionary, not a socialist. No, that was my story. I just wanted to share this because it made me laugh.
Thank you for sharing that absurd story. All right, I've got 2 more to wrap us up. We're going to start with Nazis. You guys remember the 2017 Unite the Right March?
Fuck yeah, I was there. There was nice kebabs.
Yeah. Well, here now in 2023, 5 years later, 3 Nazis have been indicted for their role in the 2017 march.
Wow.
Which is
Hopefully one of the guys that fucking murdered that person.
No, he wasn't one of them. He was
what?
Not.
No, what?
Yeah, he already had his thing, I believe.
Okay,
I don't know if I assume he's in jail. I hope he's in jail. Good God. Anyway, this is basically. It's very strange. 5 years later, they kind of just settle on wagging a finger at just 3 of these scores of Nazis that marched in Charlottesville. You know, these were the ones with the tiki torches, marching and chanting slogans like "Jews will not replace us" and "Blood and soil." You know, like blatantly,
Regular
straight up
things.
Nazi shit. Yeah. So they've been charged not with being a Nazi and evil people, but they've been charged with, quote, burning an object on the property of another or highway or other public place with the intent to intimidate in violation of Virginia code. It's like on the most specific,
benign,
boring, benign, silly little law. And this to me was just very funny because this was probably the clearest example of the state of the Nazi movement or the fascist movement, if you want to be, more general, in the United States in recent years. And it took them 5 years to pick 3 of them, 3 nobodies, none of the leaders or anything, and give them a slap on the wrist. So this to me is just a good reminder that the capitalist state will never effectively deal with Nazis. And I think this is a great example of that failure. And while I will stop short of advocating for anything on this show, this is not the solution to Nazis. That is not how you handle a problem like this.
No. I think there's a... is anybody aware of the cockpit? I'm never gonna stop advocating for the cockpit. But yeah, if you're unaware what the cockpit is, do your research. I think that was a fairly solid solution, possibly.
But we can adapt it to like the American mechanism, so they can get like parking tickets. And then, we make a DMV in the depths of like a mine.
Oh, God.
And they all go to that DMV to pay their shit. And then they walk in and there's nobody eternally, exactly. So they just starve to death in the DMV. We lock the doors of the eternal DMV. That's the cock DMV. There we go. The new the mass extermination model just adapted to America. The American concentration camp. It's just a DMV with closed doors.
Speaking of mines, the children yearn for the mines. Yes. Child labor laws are being repealed all over the country. Recently,
kids.
These poor kids. We've got 13-year-olds working overnight shifts in slaughterhouses, cleaning razor-sharp saws, working with very dangerous chemicals. We've got kids working on farms without any safety regulations, at below minimum wage and with no cap on hours. And the latest bill to pass allows Iowa 14-year-olds to work night shifts and 16-year-olds to serve alcohol. I'm sure that will go very well. It was only a matter of time until this happened, honestly. Like, when the adult population is maximally exploited, you got to open up new avenues for profit. And that means reintroducing child labor, because that's a massive pool of labor, easily exploitable, because they don't know any better. They don't understand what is dangerous. I'm sure the bosses are thinking, well, they'll bounce more likely than an adult. If they fall off a ladder, they're a little bit more resilient and rubbery at young ages. It should be very clear what's happening in places like the United States, and this will happen elsewhere too. The United States is just kind of ahead of the curve. It's removed all the guardrails already, so this is what it looks like when capitalism is in free fall and just trying to, make as much profit as they can in the short run. It's the children are shoved back into the mines, into the big dangerous machinery. Very cool.
Thanks, Kanye. Very cool. My favorite part about all this is, down the line, I think, like you said, we're going to see a lot more of this, but we're going to start seeing, like, Gen Z union, and even what's after Gen Z, like the younger, Alpha. Even the younger.
Alpha,
yeah, the Gen Alpha people. Yeah, we're going to start seeing their fucking unionization efforts, but they're going to be such, like, the meme potential of what they deliver. I'm looking forward.
Yeah, shitpost their way to labor rights.
Exactly right. Yeah, the revolution shall be paved not with the skulls of our enemies,
but with really
with,
shitty, obscure, abstract memes.
Yeah, exactly. That and the Patrick Bateman edits.
In the end, that Facebook page, what was it? Socialist memes. It was literally called Socialist Memes. The OG one, the massive one.
Oh, the Facebook one.
The Facebook one. It's gonna end up like being written in like future history books as like the greatest theory ever written. Like this is how socialism was achieved, by dunking on motherfuckers like hardcore on Discord.
Yeah. The what's it called, history of the Bolshevik Party short course, but instead of that, it's going to be history of the American Socialist Revolution.
Edgy,
short
depressing
course, like the TikTok era.
Edgy, depressing memes for socialist teens.
Here's my greatest fear, though: the revolution must be won within one generation, because as soon as the next generation after Gen Alpha comes of age, presumably they're going to be called Gen Beta, and there's going to be so much bitterness between the alphas and the beta cucks that it needs to be secured before that bickering starts.
There you go, new class war. Once the dichotomy between the bourgeois and the proletarian is absolved and early stages of socialism are established, the next class conflict that will need to be resolved is between the alphas and the betas, which is very good. You're missing the potential here, because they will then completely disregard the old reactionary notions of class conflict and embrace generation conflict. So that's going to be a whole new thing on its path to the achievement of advanced communism. So that's
and so the path to extinction marches forward in ever dumber ways.
Exactly right. Oh man, and humanity's heritage will forever be stamped with just a big soy Wojak with a tear streaming down his face. That'll be the last monument to
a
humanity.
Last of Us post-apocalyptic world, but like 1,000 years in the future, and they're like digging through some remains of some ancient civilizations that died of a combination of climate change, nuclear war, and just being very cringe. And they find like printed out, 2007's, 2006, or troll face memes and shit. And like that's the only shit that's left over from us.
Yeah, they'll just see it's like a big marble slab, and then in text like in Latin, Roman text, it would be like, no highly esteemed deed is commemorated here. This place is not a place of honor. Nothing valued was here. Just a big soy Wojak.
It's the lost meme underneath it.
It's like what is here was dangerous and repulsive to us. This is a message that is warning about danger. Oh
is
my
this
god,
lost?
so stupid. Oh my god.
So thank you for joining us for the 76th episode in yet another installment of Send News. As we said about 100 times by now, I'm not going to repeat myself. Links below. First thought, if you haven't heard, we released some merch. It's a pretty cool way to support the show while wearing some pretty drippy shit, or drinking from it, or wearing it on your head, etc., etc. Again, link in the description. And as always, a massive thank you to all of our lovely patrons, without whom this show would not be able to run. If you choose to subscribe on Patreon, you will receive all episodes 1 week early, a whole bonus episode that doesn't come out anywhere else except on Patreon, and for certain tiers, even hangout sessions live with us. With that being said, thank you so much for joining us on this awesome episode that a lot of you people told us you missed, of the three of us just sitting and talking shit. This was an extremely fun for me. Thank you again for joining us and for all of your support. And with that being said,
this has been the Deprogram. I'm JT.
I'm Hakeem.
And I am Ugopnik.
The leaks depicted the US as the soy Wojak. Until you're done. You're finished.